Hey guys, today we're going to talk about World War I itself and the two-front war going on. World War I is kind of like two wars in one because we have two very distinct types of fighting going on. We have a world war because we have lots of areas involved, and we see the home front involved for the first time. So let's talk about the different sides of the war. So first we have the Allied side, which is made up of Great Britain, France, Japan, the United States, and Russia. Now, not all those players will be in at the same time, but that's our main players throughout the war. We also have our Central Powers, which are made up of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. Now, Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire are our two big empires left, and they're going to be our two big empires that fall apart after the war. So again, World War I was a two-front war with two very distinct fighting styles. The one you know best is probably the Western Front. This is the one that's been glorified in movies the most. It's mainly between Germany and Great Britain and France. And so Germany's plan basically to take over France and get an advantage is the Schlieffen Plan, which basically is that they would go through the top of France and kind of take it like this, take it in a curve and control France. They don't get very far. And instead of taking large amounts of areas, the Western Front is basically becomes two lines that just push back and forth with each other. And eventually we just make camp. And these are the trenches. So a trench is basically a dugout piece of land that you can hide in and then kind of go up and shoot when you need to. So both sides are going to make these trenches, and the area in between is known as no man's land. And basically if you got out of your trench and went into no man's land, you were most likely to get shot and killed. So these trenches, not very pleasant to live in because it rains and they're made out of mud and it stays wet and there's rampant disease, and then rats come in, and like if your buddy falls and dies or is shot, rats will come out and eat him. It's terrible. We have trench foot, which is like a fungus on your foot, and they'd often have to cut off your foot because of that. Just terrible conditions. But we do have some new inventions we see in trench warfare. Barbed wire is one. So they wrap barbed wire basically to keep the enemy from invading your trench. We also see the trench coat come in as a way to protect against mustard gas, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and also the conditions of the trenches. Basically full-on coat, boots, and lots of pockets in order to keep your stuff, your weapons. And again, we see mustard gas used in trench warfare. So what mustard gas is it's basically chemical warfare. They throw it over to the other side. And mustard gas, if you breathe it in, fills your lungs with fluid, so you suffocate. And if it gets on your skin, it's like acid that will burn your skin off. And so the trench coats help against that. And then we see these big masks that they would wear in order to help them breathe so they wouldn't inhale the mustard gas. The Eastern Front isn't as different from traditional warfare. We see Germany and Austria-Hungary mainly against Russia, horseback, swords, guns, going at each other. What's unique about World War I is that everyone was involved for basically the first time. That not only did the men go off and fight, but everything done at home was to support the war effort. So one of these things is, we have industrialization. All these men working in the factories go off to war, so the women come in and fill those jobs. And when women start working, they get more rights. And so even though they're going to lose these jobs when the men come back, they're going to have an opportunity again in World War II to do the same thing. And so we see the rise of women's rights as a result of them working in the factories while the men are off at war. We see states that gain power by controlling industry. They control the factories and the railroads to support the war effort, but we see kind of the rise of strong governments. We also see propaganda come from the governments. Basically, these are posters, illustrations that depict either the enemy as being terribly evil or the home as being kind of righteous and glorious. And so this is used to help support and fuel support for the war effort. We're going to see propaganda used in World War II, and propaganda is even used today if you know where to look. We also see that the governments basically lie to their people. They don't tell them the truth about what's going on in the war. This is true especially in Germany. German people think they're winning this whole time, And when Germany loses and they're basically blamed for the war and have to pay all these reparations, the German people feel like they've been wronged not only by the enemy but by their own government. Again, this is a world war because of imperialism. We see colonies involved, not only sending resources but also soldiers, which I guess could be a resource. And we also see wars fought on sea, navy blockades to keep resources from reaching the motherland. So there's a lot of death in World War I, but not all from fighting. Smoking is going to cause a lot of death. Again, we're sitting in these trenches, we're bored, and so people pick up smoking, and that's going to kill a lot of people. Conditions themselves are going to be, a cause for so much death, especially in the trenches. Remember, it's wet, there are rats, there's lice, lots of disease, dead bodies everywhere. I mean, it's just not good conditions. And then the Spanish flu happens around the same time World War I, which you wouldn't think would be important, but we had a whole DBQ on it the other year. And so the Spanish flu comes in and is going to wipe out a majority of populations in Europe and America. And this is going to happen around the end of World War I. It's going to kill, comparable amounts of people to World War I itself. So again, World War I is kind of unique that we kind of have the old fighting styles with new technology, and we don't quite know how to use it. I mean, tanks are even invented in World War I, but they're really not used. We also see the home front involved for the first time to its fullest. And again, it's a world war because of the involvement of the colonies. Next time we're going to talk about the end of World War I and how that's going to set us up for World War II. I'll see you next time.